Viewer advisory. The events you are about to witness are based on a true story. Some scenes may be deeply unsettling for certain audiences. Viewer discretion is strongly recommended. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Officer Elena Rodriguez walked through the steel corridors of Huntsville Penitentiary for what she thought would be just another routine shift. She had no idea that within these concrete walls, she was about to uncover a conspiracy that would shake the very foundations of justice in Texas. What started as a simple prison assignment would spiral into a deadly game of corruption, murder, and redemption that would test everything she believed about right and wrong. Tonight's story is one that will leave you rattled. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, let's begin. Elena wasn't your typical corrections officer. At 28, she possessed a sharp intellect that had earned her a criminal justice degree from UT Austin, but a series of unfortunate events had led her to this maximum security facility instead of the detective career she'd once dreamed of. Her rejection of her supervisor's advances back in Dallas had cost her dearly. Captain Torres had made sure of that. Now, exiled to this fortress of concrete and steel, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Her dark hair always pulled back in a regulation bun, her uniform pressed to perfection. The other officers had tried their luck with her, of course. Officer Brett from the night shift brought her coffee every morning, hoping for a smile that never came. Sergeant Williams found excuses to patrol her section, dropping hints about dinner that fell on deaf ears. Even the warden himself, a man named Harrison with silver temples and expensive cologne, had made his interest known. But Elena had learned to keep her walls high and her focus laser-sharp on the job at hand. That focus wavered the day she met David Chun. David wasn't like the other inmates. Where others carried themselves with the hardened swagger of career criminals or the broken shuffle of the defeated, David moved with quiet purpose. He was 32, tall and lean, with intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. His cell was immaculate, his behavior exemplary. Most striking of all, he spent his free time in the prison library, not lifting weights in the yard or playing cards like the others. For weeks, Elena noticed him watching her during her rounds, not with the crude leering she'd grown accustomed to from other prisoners, but with something that looked almost like recognition, as if he knew something about her that she didn't know herself. It unnerved her more than she cared to admit. The first direct contact came on a sweltering Tuesday in August. Elena was escorting a group of inmates back from the cafeteria when David fell in a step beside her. "Officer Rodriguez," he said quietly, his voice carrying the hint of an education that seemed out of place in these surroundings. "No talking during movement," she replied curtly, but something in his tone made her glance at him. "I need to tell you something important," he continued, ignoring her rebuke. "About why I'm really here." Elena's training kicked in. She should have written him up immediately, but instead she found herself saying, "You can request a meeting through proper channels." David smiled sadly. "The proper channels are exactly what got me into this mess. Meet me in a library during evening recreation. Please. Lives depend on it." That night, against every instinct and regulation she'd ever been taught, Elena found herself walking toward the prison library. The sparse evening crew meant fewer eyes on her movements, but her heart still hammered as she pushed open the heavy wooden door. David was alone among the stacks, a thick file folder open before him. He looked up as she entered, relief flooding his features. "You came. I shouldn't be here," Elena said, but she didn't turn around. "No one should be here under false pretenses," David replied. "But that's exactly what happened to me." Elena remained standing, arms crossed. "Every inmate claims innocence." "I'm not claiming innocence," David said, standing slowly. "I'm claiming I was framed for trying to prevent mass murder." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. "What are you talking about?" David gestured to the folder. "I was a quality control manager at Riverside Pharmaceuticals. We manufacture medications for nursing homes across the Southwest. 2 years ago, corporate decided to boost profits by cutting corners on safety protocols. Elena found herself taking a step closer despite her reservations. "They wanted me to sign off on a new preservative compound," David continued, his voice growing harder. The problem was this compound was toxic in elderly patients. The test results showed it could cause organ failure, but the symptoms would take months to manifest. By then, it would look like natural deaths. And you refused? I refused, and I kept copies of everything. When I threatened to go to the FDA, they moved fast. Suddenly, I was under investigation for embezzling company funds. Computer records showed fake transactions with my digital signature. Bank accounts I'd never opened appeared with my social security number. Elena studied his face, looking for the telltale signs of deception she'd been trained to spot. Instead, she saw only grim determination. They gave me 15 years, David said quietly. But that's not the worst part. 3 months after I was convicted, elderly patients in 7 states started dying from mysterious organ failures. The newspapers called it a tragic coincidence. Elena's blood ran cold. How many? 83 confirmed deaths in the first wave. The real number is probably twice that. David's hands clenched into fists. 83 grandparents, great-grandparents, people who survived wars and raised families and deserve to die peacefully in their sleep, not writhing in agony because some executives wanted to boost their quarterly numbers. Elena sank into a nearby chair, her mind reeling. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the first person who's walked into this place who still gives a damn about justice, David said. I've watched you. You treat every inmate with respect, even the ones who don't deserve it. You follow the rules because you believe in what they represent, not because someone's watching. Even if what you're saying is true, what can I do about it? I'm just a corrections officer. David pulled a small piece of paper from his pocket. My former lab assistant, Dr. Sarah Kim, went underground after I was convicted. She has copies of all the original test results, the real ones. This is how to contact her. Elena stared at the paper without taking it. This could cost me my career. My freedom. It could, David agreed. But doing nothing has already cost 83 people their lives, and that number grows every day those medications stay on the market. Elena looked into David's eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in years of law enforcement. Genuine moral courage. Slowly, she reached out and took the paper. What followed were 3 months of the most dangerous investigation Elena had ever conducted. Working nights and weekends, she tracked down Dr. Kim, who was living under an assumed name in rural New Mexico. The evidence was overwhelming. Test results, email chains, recorded phone calls where executives discussed the acceptable casualty rates of their decision. Elena built her case methodically, but she also built something else, a relationship with David that went far beyond duty. Their clandestine meetings in the library became the highlight of both their weeks. They talked about more than just the case. They shared stories, dreams, fears. Elena found herself counting down the hours until she could see his face again. But love in a place like Huntsville comes with a price. Warden Harrison noticed Elena's frequent trips to the library. Other officers began whispering about her special interest in inmate shun. Elena knew she was walking a tightrope, but she couldn't stop, not when they were so close to the truth. The breakthrough came when Elena managed to get the evidence to the right journalist, Maria Santos, at the Austin Chronicle. Santos had the connections and credibility to make the story stick. When the expose hit the newsstands on a cold December morning, it sent shockwaves through the state. Pharma giant covered up deadly drug side effects, the headline screamed. Whistleblower framed to silence truth. Within hours, federal agents were raiding Riverside Pharmaceuticals. Within days, executives were being arrested. Within a week, David's conviction was under emergency review. Elena was in the courtroom the day David walked free. 26 months after their first meeting in the library, she watched as the judge apologized on behalf of the state of Texas and declared David a free man. The gallery erupted in applause, but Elena only had eyes for David as he turned to find her in the crowd. Their reunion was brief, too many cameras, too many questions. But David managed to whisper 4 words that made Elena's heart soar. Dinner tomorrow night? Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. After everything they'd endured, they finally had a chance at a normal life together. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. 3 days later, Elena's phone rang, 3 a.m. David's voice was strained, terrified. "Elena, they took Dr. Kim." Two men in suits grabbed her outside her apartment. "I think they're coming for me next." Elena was already reaching for her gun and badge. "Where are you?" "Safe house in Austin, but I don't think it's safe anymore." "Elena, there's something else." The executives they arrested, they were middle management. The real decision makers, the ones with the power to orchestrate a frame job like mine, they're still out there. Elena's mind raced. Of course, cut off the visible heads of the Hydra, but leave the brain intact. "Stay where you are. I'm coming." Elena broke every speed limit between Huntsville and Austin, her training and instincts taking over. She found David's safe house surrounded by black SUVs, their tinted windows reflecting the streetlights like dead eyes. Elena parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, her service weapon drawn. The confrontation that followed was brutal and swift. Elena's years of law enforcement training served her well as she systematically took down the hired guns who'd been sent to eliminate the last witnesses to Riverside's crimes. When the smoke cleared, she and David stood over 5 unconscious mercenaries while sirens wailed in the distance. The real masterminds, a cabal of pharmaceutical executives and corrupt government officials, were finally exposed when Dr. Kim's rescue led to a treasure trove of evidence they'd been trying to destroy. The trials that followed were televised nationwide, becoming a symbol of what happens when ordinary citizens refuse to let corruption triumph. David testified for the prosecution, his quiet dignity and obvious integrity making him a compelling witness. Elena was commended for her investigation and offered a position with the FBI's white-collar crime unit. Most importantly, the deadly medications were pulled from the market permanently, saving countless lives. On the day the final verdicts were read, life sentences for the 3 main conspirators, Elena and David sat in the courtroom holding hands, watching as justice was finally served. The families of the 83 victims had their answers at last. The truth had emerged from the darkness, and the guilty would pay for their crimes. 6 months later, Elena and David were married in a small ceremony attended by Dr. Kim, Maria Santos, and dozens of family members who'd lost loved ones to the pharmaceutical conspiracy. Their wedding made the local news, but not because of the romance. It made news because it represented something larger. 2 ordinary people who'd refused to stay silent in the face of evil, who'd risked everything for the truth, and who'd found love in the most unlikely of places. As Elena walked down the aisle toward David, she thought about the path that had brought them together. The corruption that had cost her a promotion, the assignment that had seemed like punishment, the prisoner who'd turned out to be the most honest man she'd ever met. Sometimes justice takes time, but it always finds a way. Today, David works as a consultant, helping law enforcement agencies investigate pharmaceutical fraud. Elena leads a task force specializing in corporate whistleblower cases. They've been married for 3 years, and they still hold hands when they watch the news, still remember what it cost to bring truth to light. Their story reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear uniforms, and sometimes they wear prison jumpsuits. Sometimes justice comes from the most unexpected places, delivered by the most unlikely people. But it always comes to those who refuse to give up the fight. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. If you haven't already, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We upload new true crime content daily, covering cases you know and many you don't. Stick with us as we bring you more stories that deserve to be heard. See you in the next video.